Do you want to hear everything? I liked the way sunlight filtered through the curtains that day. Thin, yellow beams slicing my living room into patches of dull light and faint shadow. I remember how tired I felt, as if my brain was wrapped in cotton, and everything moved a step too slow. Maybe it was the aftermath of an early morning property showing, or the sinking dread I'd been trying to ignore for weeks. You see, I'm not the kind of man who leaps to conclusions. I prefer facts, data, solid proof. But that day, I had no choice. Evidence stared me in the face. A calendar lying open on the kitchen table, turned to the current month, filled with neat little notes in her handwriting. Jessica always had graceful penmanship. No loops or hearts, just clean, precise letters that said things like, lunch with /James, presentation at 2 p.m., or ovulation. That last word got me. I'd seen it before on different pages, but never connected it to anything suspicious. At first, it seemed like another detail in her controlled routine, tracking her cycle like any responsible adult might. But then I noticed the pattern. The days she scheduled business dinners or out-of-town client meetups coincided exactly with those marked ovulation, and I realized, in a single breathtaking moment, that she planned her life around something far more devastating than I'd ever imagined. I'm Michael, by the way. Michael Hale, a real estate agent from Seattle, originally from Chicago. Until recently, I thought of myself as an ordinary, hard-working husband. Sure, my marriage to Jessica had lost some spark, but that's what happens when you've been together a while, right? You forget to book the fancy dinners, you skip date night, you grow comfortable. Comfortable is not supposed to be lethal, but comfort kills clarity, sometimes. That morning, I picked up her little calendar. I remember a soft blue hue from the winter sky outside, and how the table lamp seemed too yellow against it, like the colors were clashing. In the silence, everything else slowed down. The traffic outside, the hum of the fridge. My heart pounded, because one row of words on that page leaped out in stark black ink. Plan /James. Hotel. The date was circled twice, and beneath it, fertile. I should have confronted her right away, but something inside me shut down. Call it shock, call it cowardice, or maybe a survival instinct. Instead, I set the calendar back on the table. Then I grabbed my phone and texted a client about a possible showing, as if I could pretend that life was normal. I felt like I stood behind glass, watching the world. I was a spectator, numb, yet already hurting in ways I hadn't even begun to understand. The next few days went by in a blur. Jessica and I barely crossed paths. She was working late, she said. One evening, as we sat in the living room, her father was visiting from out of town, so we put on our best public smiles. The conversation was forced. She asked me for the TV remote like we were casual roommates who'd known each other too long. I handed it over, said something polite, and heard the words come out flat. Meanwhile, her father was flipping channels. I recall him stopping on an old western, colors washed out by time. Dusty brown landscapes, a dull yellow sky. And in the reflection on the television screen, I saw Jessica glancing at her phone, texting someone. For a second, I felt the tang of bitterness in my mouth. I knew who she was texting. When her father stepped out to take a phone call, I turned to her, tried to keep my voice steady. Working late tomorrow too? I asked. She lifted an eyebrow. I have a potential new corporate event client. It's an important meeting. She didn't even flinch. Her eyes were unwavering, that practiced look of confidence she'd always had, like a shell around her. I recognized it from her days planning big conferences and weddings, the pleasant smile that hid a calculating mind. Be careful, I said under my breath. She gave me a curious look, then forced a light laugh as her father came back in. Michael's always worrying, she joked. You know him, doesn't like me driving alone at night. Her father nodded. And that was it. A short, meaningless exchange, but an invisible line had been drawn in the sand. I found the check for lingerie 2 nights later. It was half crumpled in the kitchen trash. My first thought, why would Jessica throw it in there, where I might see it? Then I realized she probably forgot. Or maybe she thought I wouldn't bother looking. She purchased something from a high-end boutique, spent a ridiculous sum. The date on the receipt was from 2 weeks ago. That same day, ironically, she told me she needed to cut back on spending because we must be practical. That receipt felt like final proof. I stood there in our kitchen, the overhead light dull and flickering, a cheap bulb that needed replacing, and I felt my chest tighten. She was buying expensive lingerie, tracking her fertile days around this man James, clearly avoiding intimacy with me. For months, I'd brushed off her rejections, assumed stress or maybe a mild depression. But no, she was planning a child with someone else. She'd systematically rearranged her body and her schedule, so he'd be the father, not me. I wish I could tell you I was so furious I stormed out. But in truth, I was frozen. There's a kind of rage that stops the blood cold. I just stood there, paper in hand, my mind blank. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. Jessica stopped. "Michael? Are you okay?" Her voice had a forced calm. She saw the slip of paper in my hand. I met her eyes. "You left this in the trash." She said nothing. Our eyes locked. She tried to read me, maybe. But I'd become a statue. "Is that a big deal?" She shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "It's just new clothes." I hated her in that moment. But I also hated myself, because I couldn't find words strong enough. My jaw clenched, my fists balled up around that slip of paper. Finally, I dropped it on the counter. I heard a dull clang from the radiator behind us, the old housepipes complaining. My voice came out flat, like someone else was speaking for me. "I know what you're doing." She swallowed, but her expression stayed calm. "What exactly do you know?" My heart pounded. "You can ask your calendar." She froze, eyes flicking away, then said softly, "We'll discuss this later. My dad's still here." And for a second, I caught a glimpse of real panic in her eyes. She turned and hurried back to the living room. I stayed behind, breathing raggedly, the overhead light flickering around me in that dingy yellow cast. I felt no relief in having confronted her, just a simmering anger that threatened to boil over. The next day, I pretended to work. I had a showing scheduled, but I canceled it. Couldn't concentrate. Instead, I drove aimlessly around Seattle, winding through side streets, the sky overhead shifting from dull gray to a watery blue as the sun fought its way through the clouds. I ended up near a cafe we used to visit when we first moved here, parked out front, and stared at the entrance. My mind replayed our early days, how Jessica and I were so excited about building a new life. She'd said we were unstoppable together. A decade ago, that felt real. Now it was a cruel joke. By late afternoon, I realized I had to see it for myself. I had to confirm what my gut told me. Jessica mentioned a meeting at a certain hotel downtown. I drove there, parked across the street, walked into the lobby like I belonged. A doorman greeted me politely. The lighting was a muted amber, soft, elegant, the kind that tries to hide wrinkles and flaws. My stomach churned. I asked at the front desk if an event was going on. They said no, nothing big. So I wandered around, scanning the bar and lounge area. Anxiety twisted inside me as I sank into one of the plush chairs, pretending to read a magazine. And then I saw them. Jessica and James Bauman. I recognized him from a photo on her phone I once glimpsed. Tall, good-looking, a smirk on his face that said he was used to winning. They walked together through a set of glass doors leading to the suites upstairs. She had her hand on his arm, leaning in. My heart hammered so hard I nearly dropped the magazine. I waited 15 minutes, maybe more. My mind swirled with images. I felt raw, sweaty, as if I'd just run a marathon. Then something in me demanded I see it, demanded that I confront not just them, but also my own illusions. So I followed. Each step toward the elevator burned. Every shift of the overhead lights felt too bright. I took the elevator to the 8th floor, feeling my limbs shake with anger, or fear, or both. The hallway was quiet, drab, with that standard beige hotel wallpaper. Doors at regular intervals, brass numbers. I didn't know which was theirs, so I listened. Footsteps, muffled voices. Then a door slammed near the end of the corridor. I walked slowly, pulse pounding in my ears. The corridor lighting was fluorescent, cold, making everything look pale blue, as if tinted by sadness. I saw them. The room door was slightly ajar. I heard Jessica's laugh, high and tense, then hushed. It made my skin crawl. I should have turned back, but I didn't. I crept closer until I heard the shuffle of clothes, a gasp, and a low murmur. My stomach twisted. My body felt disconnected from my mind as I pushed the door open another inch. They were wrapped around each other, half undressed, her hair falling forward as she pressed her face to his neck. Her blouse undone, new lingerie peeking out, black lace that looked both delicate and shockingly intimate. His jacket was off, shirt unbuttoned, and his hands were on her waist, pulling her closer. The glow from a single lamp tinted the room in a sickly, dull yellow, making the scene look surreal. Their breathing filled the air. Heat flushed my face. Jessica murmured something. "Do we have time?" And my heart nearly collapsed. Her tone was soft, seductive. I'd never heard her speak that way to me. The erotic charge in her voice was undeniable, and I realized with savage clarity that she was giving him a side of herself I never got. My throat felt tight. Blood thundered in my ears. Then her eyes flicked up. She saw me. An intake of breath. James whipped around, shock etched on his face. Jessica's expression twisted. Guilt and terror and something else, maybe anger, as though she blamed me for seeing what I wasn't supposed to see. She stammered, "Michael? What? What are you?" I stared, numb. James quickly let go of her, tried to reach for his shirt. I found my voice, harsh and trembling. "Keep going," I said, hearing the cruelty in my own tone. "I don't want to interrupt your important meeting." Jessica scrambled off the bed, pulling the blouse over her half-exposed body. "It's not what." "Stop," I cut her off. "Don't insult me with lies." James stepped forward, attempting some version of dignity. "Michael, we need to talk." I almost laughed at how ridiculous that sounded. He was half-dressed, sporting an arrogant tone. I clenched my fists, a burst of red-hot fury shooting up my spine. For a moment, I pictured breaking his jaw, just to feel some sense of justice. But instead, I turned to Jessica. My voice came out low. "You planned this," I said. "I saw your calendar. I know about the days, the ovulation, everything." The color drained from her face, her lips parted, and she visibly swallowed. Meanwhile, James looked from her to me, confusion turning to realization. I saw in his eyes the flicker of triumph that he'd beaten me in some twisted competition. I wanted to strangle him. "Michael," Jessica started, a tremor in her voice. "Please, not here. Let's just—" "No," I said. "I'm done. You can do whatever you want. But you won't do it in my home. Understand?" She closed her eyes, and James gently placed a hand on her shoulder. There was a part of me that died right there, seeing him comfort her. Everything about the scene felt wrong, nauseating. I left. I could hardly feel my feet hitting the hallway floor, hardly remember the elevator ride back to the lobby. My entire universe seemed tinted that dull, sickly yellow from the lamp in that room. I stepped outside, where the late afternoon sky was a bleak, pale blue. The contrast felt like stepping from one hell into another. By the time I reached my car, I couldn't see straight. The edges of my vision blurred with tears of rage and humiliation. For the next few days, I barely spoke to Jessica. Our interactions were limited to polite exchanges when absolutely necessary. She tried to talk once or twice, usually at night, but my fury was a steel wall. Each time she opened her mouth, I'd snap, "Leave me alone," or "Go text James." Her father was still in town, so we pretended for his sake, had a stiff dinner with him in our house, forced conversation about nonsense. That dinner stands out in my memory. Bright overhead lights, shining off the cutlery, the tablecloth a pale shade of blue with an ugly floral pattern Jessica had picked. Her father asked me about real estate. I gave short, clipped answers. Jessica kept fiddling with her phone under the table. The tension was suffocating. When her father asked if everything was okay, she gave some excuse about my having a bad day at work. I just nodded, glaring at her. Eventually, her father left, and the moment he was out the door, she turned to me in the hallway. "Michael, we need to handle this like adults," she said. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." I laughed bitterly. "Adult? You used me. And you're sorry?" I stepped closer, my voice dropping. "You planned every second. You tracked your fertility. You avoided me to make sure it wasn't my child. Or was I just never good enough?" She didn't deny it. Her silence was answer enough. My gut twisted. "You wanted to get pregnant," I said. "With him." Jessica pressed her lips together. "Michael, you and we've been drifting apart. I wanted something more, something I felt you couldn't give me. And James, it just happened." I stared at her in disbelief. "It just happened. You mark a calendar, schedule hotel rooms, buy lingerie, and it just happens." "You're insulting me." She shut her eyes. "I can't change what I've done. If you want me gone, I'll pack my things." I felt a wave of conflicting emotions. Anger, pity, heartbreak. "Get out, then." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes, but she didn't move. Something held her there, maybe the comfort of our home, or the realization that leaving had consequences she wasn't ready to face. I let her keep living under the same roof, but we were strangers, or worse. Each time I saw her, I remembered the dingy yellow light in the hotel room, the black lingerie, her voice whispering to him. So I started my own plan. Quietly, systematically, I put our condo on the market. I have enough connections to expedite that sort of thing without her knowledge. Within days, I had a serious buyer, a middle-aged couple relocating from California. They loved the place. Jessica found out almost too late. I told her casually one evening, after returning from a property closing. I poured myself a stiff drink, scotch on the rocks, and leaned against the kitchen counter. "By the way, I sold our condo today." She blinked. "What do you mean, you sold it?" "You can't just." "It was in my name," I said. "Paid from my account, if you recall. Legally, I can do what I want. Go ask your fancy lawyer friends." Her eyes widened in panic. "Where are we supposed to live?" You can live wherever you want." I sipped my drink, felt the burn in my throat. "I'll figure something out for myself." She stared, at a loss for words. Then her anger flared. "You're punishing me." "Yes," I said simply. "I am." That cut her short. She seemed shaken. Tears welled up again, but I was too numb for sympathy. We carried on in that hostile silence for weeks as the escrow process moved forward. She tried to talk me out of it, threatened to get lawyers involved, but I'd done my homework. The real estate was in my name, purchased before we were officially married, part of a separate property. The legal side was tricky, but I had the upper hand. More than once, she collapsed in tears, sobbing that she never intended for it to go this far, but I hardened my heart. She had planned everything, her own twisted game. Now she'd have to deal with my rules. One day, after the final sale documents were signed, we had relatives over. Her cousin was visiting from out of state, and we had them all in the living room for what was supposed to be a casual get-together. Everyone sensed the tension. I could see people whispering on the side, glancing at Jessica and me. She tried to put on a brave face, offering coffee and pastries. At some point, her cousin asked, "So, how's life here in Seattle? Any new developments?" I took that opportunity. "We're moving out," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "In fact, I sold this place. Jessica will be leaving soon too, I believe." Jessica's eyes flashed with alarm. She put on a forced smile. "It's complicated. We'll talk about it later." Then she shot me a look that said, "Why are you doing this in front of them?" I shrugged. "No secrets, right?" The rest of the visit was excruciating. Her cousin tried to make small talk, clearly uncomfortable. Jessica and I navigated the awkwardness like two boxers circling each other in the ring. Finally, after the relatives left, she cornered me in the hallway. "Why are you humiliating me in front of my family?" she demanded, her face streaked with tears. "You're punishing me, I get it. But do you have to be so cruel?" I looked at her, my anger flared. "Cruel? You timed your cycle so you could conceive another man's child behind my back. That's cruelty." She let out a ragged sob. "I made a mistake. I lost track of who I was. You can go," I said, stepping past her. "But remember, you won't run away from yourself." I heard her gasp, felt the weight of my words sink in. For a long moment, we both stood there, breathing heavily, each consumed by our own pain. I walked to the bedroom we once shared, now filled with boxes, some mine, some hers. She followed, quiet now, eyes desperate for something. Forgiveness. Acceptance. I had none to give. For the next few days, she tried to reach me emotionally. Sometimes I found her crying in the living room, hugging her knees, whispering she was sorry. Other times, she was furious, hurling accusations that I'd neglected her, that my job always came first. She insisted she only wanted love and a real family. But I wouldn't budge. I was done being her doormat, done swallowing my pride. I wanted her to know the taste of fear, the sense of walls closing in. Then came the final confrontation with James. He showed up at the condo unannounced on a Saturday morning. I was in the garage, packing tools, wearing old jeans and a flannel shirt. The sky outside was a dull gray, threatening rain. Jessica must have let him in. I heard footsteps behind me. Turned around, saw him standing at the threshold with an air of cautious confidence. "Michael," he said, giving me a stiff nod. "We need to talk." I exhaled slowly. "Guess we do. Come in, if you dare." He stepped forward, glancing around the messy garage. I deliberately didn't offer him a seat. Let him stand there, unsettled. He cleared his throat. "I'm aware of the situation. Jessica told me you're selling this place, and that you found out about us. I'm not here to cause trouble." "No." I raised an eyebrow. "You got what you wanted, right?" He looked pained. "It wasn't about taking anything from you. It was." He paused, searching for words. "We connected. It happened. But this hostility, it's hurting Jessica." I almost laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. Hurting Jessica. She orchestrated everything. James frowned. "She's not the only one at fault. I pursued her too. I'm taking responsibility." My anger boiled. I stepped closer, and for a second, I thought about punching him. He must have seen it in my eyes, because he backed up a step. "I don't need your pity, James," I said quietly, "and I don't need your attempt at being a noble man now. I don't care if you ride off into the sunset with her, but understand this. You too used me, lied to me. If you think I'm going to just pat you on the back, you're insane." He swallowed. "What do you want me to do?" I stared at him, feeling the coldness in my chest. "I want you to realize that you've destroyed something that was mine. And for that, I'll never forgive you." He nodded slowly. "I respect that." I turned away. "You can go. Unless you have some other dramatic speech about love and destiny." He hesitated, then said softly, "Take care of yourself, Michael." "I do regret this." I said nothing, just picked up a hammer and resumed packing, ignoring the tremor in my hands. Finally, he left. I stood there a long time, the gray daylight making every object in the garage look colorless, waiting for the anger to settle. By the time the condo was fully sold and the move-out date approached, Jessica was a wreck. She was losing the home, the marriage, and the veneer of a stable life. I suspect she also felt guilty about how meticulously she plotted everything. Maybe she never wanted it to end in total ruin. But that was the monster she created, and I was determined she'd pay for it. One evening, as dusk settled outside in a pale blue haze, we had our final standoff. She sat on the couch, hugging the throw pillow. Her eyes were red from crying. I joined her, not out of compassion, but out of some need to see this through. "Why didn't you just leave me earlier?" I asked, my voice low. "If you were so unhappy, why not ask for a divorce?" "Why the deceit?" She shrugged helplessly. "I was afraid. Afraid of losing stability, of hurting you, I don't know. Maybe I wanted the best of both worlds. Did you ever love me?" My throat felt tight asking it, but I needed to know. She closed her eyes. "Yes, I did. But over time, things changed. We changed. I wanted a child so badly, and it seemed you were always busy, always working." James listened, made promises. I started to believe he was the answer. And now? She let out a bitter laugh. "Now I see how selfish I was. But it's too late for apologies." Silence settled between us. I noticed the living room lamp cast a dull yellow glow, just like the one in that damned hotel room. Everything was overshadowed by that memory. Finally, she asked, "Where will you go, Michael?" I shrugged. "I'll rent a smaller place. Maybe near my office. Doesn't matter. I just want to be free of this farce." Tears trickled down her cheeks. She nodded, as if accepting a prison sentence. "I guess I deserve that." I felt a wave of pity. This was the woman I once adored, despite everything. But the hurt was too deep, the betrayal too calculated. I couldn't muster forgiveness. Instead, I said, "Go ahead and pack your things. The official move-out is in 3 days. Find a place for yourself. Maybe James will pick you up, or maybe you'll find some other solution." She looked up at me, a flicker of pain in her eyes. I never realized how much I'd lose. I thought it would be different. "You never really knew me, Jessica," I said quietly. "I'm not just that predictable guy you took for granted." With that, I got up and walked away, leaving her sobbing softly into the pillow. My emotions were all over the map. Rage, sorrow, regret, twisted satisfaction at her despair. But I knew I was on the path of no return. The final day arrived. The condo was empty now, most of the furniture hauled off. I walked through each room, remembering our early life together, the times we laughed, the times we planned a future. Jessica lingered near the window, staring at the city skyline in the distance. The sky was that same watery Seattle blue, with the sun struggling behind a layer of clouds. No illusions remained. I let out a breath. "I'm heading out," I said. "I'll leave the keys for the new owners in the lockbox. You can do what you need to do." She turned, voice trembling. "Michael, is there any chance we can talk after this? Try to salvage something?" I studied her face. She looked worn out, older than her 39 years. "No," I said gently but firmly. "I have nothing left to give you." She lowered her gaze. "I understand." I walked to the door. "You can leave," I said, "but you can't run away from yourself." That's all I have left to say. Without looking back, I stepped outside. The corridor had that same dull lighting, the walls painted a pale yellow that felt claustrophobic. But I took the stairs, one at a time, each footfall echoing like a drumbeat. My mind was strangely calm, as though every storm had passed. Outside, the day was crisp and bright, the blue in the sky more vivid than I'd seen in a long time. My chest felt hollow, but I breathed in deeply. I stood there, feeling the city's cold air on my face. Cars passed by, people walked dogs, life moved on, as if nothing had happened. But inside me, a war had ended, one with no real winners. For a moment, I just listened to my pulse. Then I walked to my car, turned on the engine, and felt the steady vibration under my seat. That numbness I'd been clinging to finally started to fade. I realized my hands weren't shaking anymore. Maybe I'd been living in suspended animation. And now, with my revenge complete, the reality was sinking in. This was my life. I'd torn down the house I built with her because she betrayed me. It felt like I'd burned half of my identity to the ground. I drove endlessly for a while, letting the city unfold around me. Streets, buildings, traffic lights, people. I stopped at a park near the waterfront, a place I used to go on quiet Sunday mornings. The sun was already sinking, painting the sky in an exhausted golden light. Not quite the sickly yellow I'd grown to hate. This was softer, warmer, like a promise that even endings had a new beginning hidden somewhere. I parked, got out, walked along the water. My reflection stared back at me from the rippling surface. An older man than I remembered, eyes heavier, a line of tension across my brow. I stood there, hands in my jacket pockets, letting the wind whip across my face, and I realized I finally felt something other than anger or pity. I felt relief. Do I regret what I did? Sometimes. Part of me wonders if I should have handled it differently, if I should have let her go gently. But every time I think back on that calendar, on her careful planning, on the hotel room scene with the black lace, and that dull lamp, I choke on bitterness. She meant to steal my future, to erase me as a man. So yes, I wanted her to pay. That's not noble or kind. It's just honest. Standing there by the water, I thought of my father, a man who believed in loyalty above all else. He'd be disgusted by how this all went down. Or maybe he'd say I did the only thing I could do. Fight back, then walk away. Sometimes you have to let the flame burn everything, so you can start from scratch. In that park, as the wind pulled at my hair, a strange calm settled in my chest. The swirling anger receded. I breathed in the salt air, the last of the day's light glinting off the water, a faint golden hue. I felt a flicker of hope in the midst of the ruin. I'm not a saint. Far from it. I torched my marriage, sold our home, humiliated her in front of family. I turned from a quiet, accommodating husband into something cold and punishing, and yet, I don't think I could have lived with myself otherwise. She robbed me of trust. I had to rob her of comfort. In the end, I'm still a man standing on a shoreline, uncertain of tomorrow. I've got a few things going for me. My job, my savings, my own 2 feet. Maybe I'll find a smaller condo in a less expensive neighborhood. Maybe I'll throw myself into work, close some big deals, distract myself from the painful memories. Or maybe I'll learn to let it all go and start seeing life through new eyes, unburdened by illusions. All I know is I won't be the same Michael who watched from behind glass, paralyzed by fear and betrayal. That version of me died the day I opened that hotel room door. Now I'm something else. Wounded, yes, but also free. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what's real inside you. Jessica can do as she pleases with James, but she can't escape the truth of what she did. And neither can I forget. Maybe in time, my anger will fade. Maybe not. For now, I'll carry it with me. It's a reminder, a warning never to let myself be used so cruelly again. I stood there until the sky turned darker, that gentle gold giving way to deepening shades of blue. Lights flickered on across the water, reflecting in dancing patterns on the waves. Something about it was beautiful, and I felt my chest loosen. I took another breath, closed my eyes, and let the moment sink in. Then I turned around and left. I had a life to rebuild. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could make choices, my own choices, without waiting for someone else's permission or approval. I drove away from the waterfront with a sense of purpose. The final chord of vengeance echoed behind me, but I knew I was heading toward something new. Everything had changed, but maybe that wasn't all bad. In time, perhaps I'd even find the courage to forgive myself for how low I'd sunk. For now, though, I was content just to breathe, to keep moving forward, away from the shadows of a marriage built on lies. And as I pulled onto the main road, headlights illuminating the asphalt ahead, I felt a faint pulse of life inside me again. I had returned to myself.